So let's take a look at an Orc Speedwaaagh list that crushed a GT in style, taking the final in a single ridiculous turn of brutal shooting. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're just looking through an immensely competitive Orcs list, roughly how it works, and perhaps talk about a few of the issues it kind of highlights that Games Workshop might want to address in competitive 40k. The list is a really quite fun variant on the Orc Speedwaaagh, and to be honest, despite having really quite a lot of Orc-light vehicles, it does feel like a fairly nice themed army, with a ridiculous amount of Orky vehicles hurtling their way towards the enemy, all guns blazing. Perhaps not quite as ridiculously spammy as the things like the 9 Scrapjet and Squigboggy lists that we've seen going around. So here we have Logan Heath's Freebooters Speedwaaagh list, who used it to take first at the Socal Open, defeating a whole load of very good players along the way, including Sean Naden in the final. It's based around 2 Outrider detachments of Freebooters Orcs, and it's just a massive overload of units that you really can't afford to ignore. They're going to come and get you very, very fast. You're not going to be able to hide from them, and the Freebooters clan trait is an excellent boost to Orky shooting, because after you kill your first unit in the shooting phase, all the rest of the army gets +1 ballistic skill, which is an apocalyptic damage increase on Orcs, due to usually hitting on 5s going to hitting on 4s, which will average a 50% damage increase across the whole army. It sometimes can be a pain and unreliable to activate, but even against relatively tough lists on turn 2 onwards, it really should be very reliable indeed. The list is a Speedwaaagh led by Deathkiller Wartrag. Speedwaaagh meaning that you can advance and shoot for no penalty if you need to, can be handy on those Squigboggies. Dakka weapons get +1 shot on the turn that you call it, great on those Dakka jets, and every single ranged weapon across the army gets an extra pip of AP for the first 2 turns after it's called. I suspect most of the time this will be calling Speedwaaagh right from the get-go to deliver an absolutely brutally punishing alpha strike with those Dakka jets. The Deathkiller Wartrag in itself is kind of okay, though I'd say nothing to write home about. A bit of countercharge threat, and the Junk Boss Warlord trait to give it a 4+ invul save. The other character leading the other Outrider detachment is a big mech in Mega Armor. He takes a custom Mega Blaster and custom Force Field, and he's got the Crush in Armor to give a 4+ invul save, +1 to saving throws for an effective 1+ save, and a nice boost of damage on the charge with some mortal wound impact hits. Just the 6+ invul can be kind of meaningful on all of these fairly low armoured Boggies. Most of them only have a 4+ save, so saving on a 6 is still something, and you do also have the option to overload the force field for a few command points. If you are facing a really high shooting army that you think is going to wipe you out turn 1, then for 2 CP you can give everyone a 5+ invul save for the first turn, and hopefully have enough units to strike back with heart. It does cost the force field for the rest of the game though. Between that and the Cloud of Smoke stratagem that you can activate for 2 CP as well, a good chunk of the army could have an invul save and also -1 to hit from ranged attacks, in combination with the sheer amount of wounds on the table and ramshackle reducing incoming damage. Most armies are really going to struggle to delete significant amounts of this list at range turn 1, unless they're bringing some seriously excessive anti-tank firepower. Next up we come to the excellent Orc Boggies, of which we have 9. No squadrons whatsoever of these though. All of these are individual Boggies, which does mean that the opponent might lose a fair bit more damage due to overkill, and they can't just plough big units all into firing at your big units of Boggies. First up we have 3 Megatrak Scrapjets, very decent Orky anti-armor with a whole bunch of damage 3 rocket shots, extra good when you're hitting on 4s as well, and they can also mix it up in combat okay as well with their ram. And then 3 individual Rocket Truck Squigboggies, basically the Orky artillery, putting out a very decent amount of strength 5, AP -2, damage 2 shooting, and one of them has taken the Nitro Squigs custom job, the one that gives them +1 to wound with those Squig launchers. That can make it actually significantly threatening against tougher targets, even wounding things like Toughness 8 vehicles on a 4+. Then it's quite fun to see a couple of the other Boggies being used, not just Scrapjets and Squigboggies. We've got 2 Shock Drum Dragsters, relatively cheap and fairly accurate anti-tank firepower with those custom shock rifles, though I think perhaps their main advantage is being very flexible and able to jump around the board with their shock tunnel, maybe getting in difficult table quarters for engage on all fronts, or just being able to get unlikely lines of sight on the enemy, and having chances to finish off things that were otherwise fairly hidden. Finally we have a custom Booster Blaster, a fairly cheap and effective Boggy, maybe not quite as overwhelming at range compared with the others, but it can actually provide a surprisingly nasty anti-infantry punch up close. It can blaze away with 4 burner exhausts, which are basically flamers, as well as that big nasty rivet cannon it mounts up top. Then moving on we have 3 units of 3 Warbikers, again pretty tough to shift with toughness 5 and -1 to hit at range natively, and particularly in freebooters these pack a pretty nasty shooting punch as well. On the turn where you call the Speedwaaagh, each biker at least has the potential to be belting out a pretty massive 12 shots at strength 5 AP -1, and again potentially hitting on 4s if you've already managed to kill a unit. A pretty crazy amount of damage dealing for such a cheap unit that can mix it up in melee okay, and can just be a pretty expendable unit to jump out and contest objectives and things. Finally, for on the ground troops we have 3 units of 1 mech gun, avoiding any leadership issues by only having 1 model, and they each have custom mega cannons. Really good value for their points these, both in terms of durability and damage. They'd certainly be taken in greater numbers if their pitiful leadership wasn't as much of an issue. Finally, and perhaps one of the scariest things about the whole list, is a contingent of flyers, 3 Dakka jets and a Wasp-bomb blaster jet, all the Dakka jets packing 2 additional super shooters for an absolute crazy payload of strength 6 fire. Again, if the stars align in the first turn of Speedwaaagh, each one of these planes is belting out a pretty monstrous 42 strength 6 AP -2 shots, all hitting on 4s. Absolutely silly value for 120 points, particularly as you're really going to struggle to hide from these. I find it kind of cool that someone is going all in and running the Wasp-bomb blaster jet too. I was wondering whether someone might be able to try and make the custom force field work, and it certainly seems that they have. This guy's very expensive at 230 points, but he gives himself and the nearby Dakka jets a 5+ invul when he's alive, as well as being a crazily scary threat in himself as well. He's going to be averaging 7 shots with those teleport mega blasters, hitting on either 3s or 4s, a strength 9 AP -2 and a huge damage D3 +3. Definitely if the opponent has any sort of long-range firepower, this thing is going to be priority number 1. Overall, I think the main strength of the list is that you're just really going to struggle to hide from all of its weapons. Everything with direct fire moves really quickly, the planes should have enough movement to get around any cover you happen to be hiding behind, the squig boggies don't care about line of sight, and even the shock jump dragsters can just teleport over the board if they want to. The list does seem to be particularly good at killing Drukhari as well, perhaps one of the biggest threats in the meta at the moment. Insane amounts of strength 5 and 6 volume fire and a bunch of damage 3 rockets. It's going to go through their things like raiders and venoms pretty quickly, as was easily demonstrated in the last couple of games of the tournament. Should be quite easy to get board control secondaries such as engage on all fronts, but maybe he's kind of going all in on winning the damage game every time, not having all that much in the way of holding objectives or doing actions, so I guess you're kind of reliant on it chewing up the opponent's list fast enough that they're not going to be able to get too ahead on the scoring themselves. Doesn't seem like that might be much of an issue though, with a crazy amount of firepower on display here. I do feel though that lists like this, and the AdMech one with all the flyers running around, they perhaps do emphasise a problem that Games Workshop has whenever they make things that both move very fast and are also very efficient gun platforms. I feel like flyers are just something that are spectacularly hard to balance in 40k. Currently the vast majority of them are really underwhelming indeed, but whenever they get good enough to be competitively viable, it makes sense just to run them en masse, and just go all in on a truly massive alpha strike to nuke your opponent off the board. Kind of a unit that if it's worth taking, it's worth spamming a whole load across multiple detachments. In any case, a truly terrifying list of ramshackle orc creations there. I'm sure it's a blast to play with, though perhaps not as fun to be on the receiving end of. Let me know your thoughts or any details I might have missed about the list down in the comments below. Look forward to hearing what you guys have to say, and feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly try and keep some semi-regular coverage of tournament lists coming out. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description below. Making all the videos does take a fair amount of time, and if you are enjoying a lot, any support is enormously appreciated. I do try and give some decent rewards to channel backers. You get to see certain videos early each week, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.